Hey, y'all, my BHE family. Welcome back to another episode of Excuse Me, Doctor. My name is Dr. Melissa Clark. Of course, please call me Dr. Mel. And I always talk about how excited I am to be back here with you each week. But it really occurred to me that I want to also say I am thankful that I get to be here each week with you and that you all tune in to hear us every week, every Monday. And for the new folks who are joining us, welcome. We are so happy to have you. And if you have a chance during the course of the show, please go ahead and hit that red subscribe button on YouTube and the like button if you're checking us out on Facebook. We really, really appreciate you for it. And those of y'all who ride with me every week know that, we love to create an amazing week for ourselves and kick the week off with these health topics, this information that we bring to you to make sure that you are empowered. That's the Be Health Empowered family, that you are empowered with the kind of information that you need to make sound and wise health decisions for not just yourself, but for your family and for your community. And then those of y'all who ride with us every week know that this is the point of the show where I have to bring in my incredible co-host, Wayne Bruce and Lila Mays. How y'all doing?
Good. How are you? Happy Monday, everybody.
Yes, happy
Man,
Monday.
if I don't get this button fixed on this microphone,
Intern keeps turning it off.
intern is going to get fired. Sick of
Well,
it.
I hope the intern and everybody had a good weekend.
I had a great weekend, Dr. Mel. Great weekend.
The same.
Yeah,
Same.
well, good. I am glad to hear that. I know my weekend was good. And despite what we're going to be talking about tonight, which is what's on everybody's mind, election season and the anxiety it brings. So how are y'all holding up in this election season hype?
I'm through. I'm through with this season. It's anxiety provoking, and I really wish the election was tomorrow so it could just be done.
You ain't the only one. I mean, I hear people talk about losing sleep. That's me. And let's not even talk about the arguments that are on social media. I mean, even people who don't usually follow politics are closely feeling pressure and anxiety and anxious right now.
Yeah. And there's actually a name for it, election stress disorder, because people are so stressed out because they feel that regardless who wins, that there might be dire consequences, even death and destruction that comes after as a result of whichever candidate wins.
Yeah. And it's because of that stress that we're doing this episode today. And I'm really concerned about our mental health with all this stress. So we brought in an expert to give us the tools and strategies to maintain our peace, woosah, in the face of social media trolls and news rhetoric from your family, your coworkers, and everyone up until election day and beyond.
Right. No, go ahead.
So I want to just tell everybody to call a friend. Call a friend, share the broadcast, because we're gonna be able to woosah. We're gonna find out what's that Bad Boys woosah, and really calm ourselves. Hopefully, we find something in it, Dr. Mel.
I hope so, because I also think that what we're going to hear tonight is not going to just apply to election stress, but just stress in general in our lives and how to decrease it. So definitely make sure y'all share this episode.
So, but before we go to our guests, what we got to do? We got to, the week that was.
That was.
The weekly
week that
recap.
was in health and wellness.
We got new sound effects. I am so excited.
I like it. All right, let's jump in. This has been a big story and continues to be. havoc wreaked by Hurricane Helene, and our hearts go out to all those devastated by this hurricane. As of yesterday, the number of souls who have died is over 220, and countless missing across 6 states.
Yeah. And it's just like we saw, unfortunately, with Katrina, which is now
Did Katrina jump up and get Dr. Mel?
Katrina done came and snatched Dr. Sound.
Dr. Mel has been snatched by Katrina.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. So what was she saying, La?
She was just saying, like what we saw with Katrina, there will be ongoing health risks to those in these affected areas, like water contamination,
Mm-hmm.
which can lead to waterborne diseases, mold growth in homes, et cetera,
Mm-hmm.
et cetera. Buildings possess respiratory health threats. So, with the
Mm-hmm.
power outages affecting electricity, for everything from refrigeration to keeping insulin cold, for power for oxygen tanks and dialysis, there's the fallout could be massive, and it was massive back with Katrina, so we could
Right.
possibly be looking at the same thing for those folks affected by Helene. you
exactly. I
know
said the word power outage, and apparently the internet heard it and took me out.
It's
But
like
I'm back.
right.
Beetlejuice. It's like
Right.
Beetlejuice. Don't say that. You can't say power outage.
Right. But you're right. The
um
fallout, not just the direct wind and water, but the power outage could also cause fatalities, unfortunately, or at least make people end up back in the hospital.
right, and then hospitals are affected as well. Doctors offices, clinics are down too, so some folks won't even be able to get medical care. It's yeah, it's a thing.
It's
It,
a
it-
lot.
it's
Yeah.
terrible. It's
And then
terrible.
when we think about the mental health toll on the
Yeah.
survivors too, the need for crisis counseling for
Mm-hmm.
people who are dealing with loss of their homes, loss of their loved ones. It's going to be a lot in the weeks coming up.
Yeah.
Right.
So we definitely need to keep them in our prayers. But there's also concrete things we could do.
Right.
Yeah, so you can help loved ones living in these devastated places, who need to apply for FEMA assistance and like temporary housing, unemployment benefits, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll drop some of this stuff in the chat,
Mm-hmm.
but folks can visit disasterassistance.gov. They can call 1-800-621-3362 or go through the FEMA app. And folks can donate to World Central Kitchen, American Red Cross, or other disaster relief funds operated by your state. So, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia. Do your best to do your research as well, but
Mm-hmm.
we'll drop resources in the chat for y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And those are specifically, reputable charities and specific things that you can do, especially there's another hurricane bearing down on Florida
Yeah.
as we so yeah, they're going to need all the help they can get.
They're gonna need
Yep.
that help. So number 2, Dr. Mel, October. We're in Breast Cancer Awareness Month.
Yep.
And I'm wearing pink.
Me too.
I didn't get the memo, y'all, but this is definitely Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and on the very first day, I actually had the good fortune to be asked to address a local high school, Bullis High School. Many of y'all might have known of it because of the two Olympians that we have from Bullis High School, Quincy Wilson, the
Mm-hmm.
youngest male athlete to complete, and Masai Russell, who won 100 gold in the 100-meter hurdles. And
Right.
so I spoke to the students at Bullis, and they honored those who were on the journey with breast cancer, who were in the audience, moms, etc., aunties who came out for the event. So it was really great. I was honored to be able to participate.
So Dr. Mel, I know why I don't look forward to this month, but why I honor this month. Who do you know who's been affected by breast cancer journey?
Well, for me, my roommate, actually, two of my dear friends from medical school, one of whom was my roommate, who unfortunately got diagnosed at age 35 and passed away 3 years later. And then another of my closest friends, and she got diagnosed early on. Breast cancer actually runs in her family.
Mm.
So she knew to check and caught it early, and thankfully is still here with us, not just here with us, but thriving.
The thriving.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And for me, I know I lost my sister. So I lost one sister to brain cancer, but I lost another sister to breast cancer. And so every year I think about her throughout the year, but I am aware of this journey. And in the music industry, for me, friends that I've worked with recently in the past year, I've had in the past 6 months, I've had three friends that I work with and another close friend, old friend of mine, come, get diagnosed with this terrible disease.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, feel free to honor those that you'd like in the chat, those listening in.
Hmm.
Um, you know, 15% of breast cancer cases are genetic, but the rest are environmental.
What can we do
Yeah.
to cut the risk? What can women do,
Yeah,
and even men? I mean, because we had Richard Roundtree affected.
right.
For those who are too young to know, he was the original Shaq.
Shaft.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm,
Well, we're going to do a whole show on breast cancer next week, but I will highlight that alcohol, cigarettes, cutting those out, having
mhm,
a plant-based diet, exercising regularly, all those
mhm.
things are super important. But we're going to hear more about the fact that there's something specifically that Black women do a lot of, which is use of chemical relaxers in the hair that is seeming to now to be correlated with higher rates of both breast cancer and uterine cancer.
What about
Um,
what about the hair dyes?
the hair dyes too,
Mhm,
exactly. So all those things, you can cut your risk by cutting back and eliminating those products, and then also getting mammograms early,
mhm.
starting at age 40, potentially earlier if you have a family history or symptoms. So you're going to hear, we're going to talk way much more about breast cancer next week, but just want y'all to think about those things in advance.
Okay.
All right. Number 3. What can lead to less depression and pain, Dr. Mill?
So there was a study done by researchers in at University of California, San Francisco. They found that trauma experienced in childhood can have lasting effects, influencing us way into our later older years in the form of pain, loneliness, and depression, even up to the end of life. And these were traumatic events, everything from losing a parent to being held back a year in school to addiction of a parent. Um, and the take home for me from all of this was that if you think that you have some unresolved trauma from childhood, addressing it through mental health counseling and doing the work, so to speak, can really potentially help you have a better quality of life, better relationships, and less suffering, even into your final years.
Yeah, this is so interesting because it could apply to so many people. Um, and a lot of people don't even consider that what they experienced as children is actually trauma. So many of us who grew up in a certain era, like children growing up in the 50s through the 90s, we were just expected to suck it up. So people think of kids as resilient and able to bounce back. How do you know if you've had childhood trauma?
So, people process stress and stressors differently. What might be a stressor to me, like riding in a roller coaster, might to somebody else be, not a stressful experience.
Mhm.
But there are different ways that you can know what's affecting you. And this is not an exhaustive list, but I think if you have feelings of ongoing anxiety, depression, feelings of of self-blame, esteem, poor self-esteem, or feelings of shame, and they're ongoing, that's a sign that you might, benefit from talking to a counselor and maybe addressing unresolved trauma.
Mhm.
Also, difficulty forming close relationships, trusting others, easy, mood swings, especially around anger, experiencing vivid flashbacks or
Mm.
intrusive memories of a prior traumatic event, or sleep disturbances. All these are signs that you might have unresolved trauma and benefit from working with a mental health professional.
Okay. And I think it's really important to note that there's no statute of limitations. It's never too late to get help for your mental and emotional well being.
Yep.
So,
Wonderful.
So
Well, that's the recap, y'all.
you know what's next?
What y'all think?
my favorite. So we polled some people and asked them because of what's in the news. Helene and Hurricane Milton is on the way. Um, are you prepared? I'll just read what you have up here, Wayne. Are you prepared if a natural or man-made disaster happens? And so we polled some folks on social media, and most people do not have a plan. Some folks do. We have a plan here. We could tighten up on our plan, but well, I'm in Los Angeles, right? So I have an earthquake preparedness kit, one in the
Oh
house and one in
wow.
the car, like all the bells and whistles, flashlight, flares, the dehydrated food, all the things.
Oh
Okay.
wow.
I
Um,
see you.
Wow.
yeah, but
So
folks, this question is for our folks on all the
put
platforms.
put
Yeah.
it in all the platforms. Just type it in. Are you prepared for natural disaster? Wind, rain, flood,
Mhm.
Earthquake,
earthquake,
hurricane,
fire,
Yeah.
tornadoes.
or man-made. What is it? Insurrection.
Yeah.
uh,
Right, all the things.
all the things. I mean, are
Yeah.
you prepared? I mean, I know I was in a chat today and someone was talking about in a music chat and it's guitars related. And somebody was saying, hey, I got money to buy either this new guitar or this new assault rifle.
Oh boy.
That
Oh,
was a real thing. And
Yeah.
I don't know which one to purchase.
Well,
So
while y'all put that in the chat, that is actually a perfect segue
it is.
into our show for tonight in terms of the stressors that we are experiencing now in election season. I want to thank Wayne and Lila. We're going to see you right back very shortly, but we're going to move into talking about, why that person might feel that they need an assault rifle. I don't know why anybody would actually feel that, but it's part of the byproduct, I think, of the times that we find ourselves in, the vile language that's being used, the lies, the hypocrisy, the inflammatory rhetoric that's part of this, of our politics. And, sort of the drums are beating louder and louder and louder as we lead up to the election season. I've personally heard things that have gotten me upset, and I vacillate between feelings of feeling upset, feeling overwhelmed, like where do you start? And because I know I'm not the only one out there, we all decided at the Be Health Empowered family on Excuse Me Doctor to invite a mental health expert, Dr. Riana Elyse Anderson, to walk us through how to maintain our mental well being during all this seeming chaos. So, Dr. Anderson is a clinical and community psychologist. She is associate professor at Columbia University, and she specializes in how racial discrimination impacts the mental health of Black adolescents and their families and develops hands-on therapeutic programs with community partners. Welcome back, Dr. Anderson. You're a friend
Oh,
of the
thank
show.
you.
Thanks so much for being here.
It's so good to be back. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to jump right into it. What are you hearing when you talk to your clients or just in general about how people are faring, maybe not just now in this election season, but just leading up even in the last 6 years when our politics seems to have gotten even more and more stressful?
Yeah, I'm not seeing clients directly at this moment, but I am in the streets trying to register folks to vote, and those have been some challenging, tense conversations. And I'll name, I'm here in Harlem, primarily Black population, and I've been really shocked, to be politically correct here, really shocked by some of the stress that Black men in particular are describing during this time with the choice that's in front of them. I heard you all talking
Mm.
earlier about feeling like either way they go, it's going to be dire, and it's not something that I consider, particularly as a woman, with some of the things that are on
Mhm.
the the agenda. I think that there is a choice that would be better for my body and my thoughts. But for a lot of the Black men, I'll say that I've encountered feelings that are quite different from my own and are strong. And so I'll say that a lot of
Mhm.
people are carrying a lot of feelings and stress around this decision for sure.
Yeah. And that's interesting that you're finding that particular segment of the population, Black men, as feeling that they don't necessarily have what it sounds like you're saying is they don't feel like they have a good alternative. Um, when you talk to people, how are you finding that just in general the stress of a polarizing political climate can impact mental health?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, and this is one of the things again I heard y'all say before, that we can take this and apply it to so many things. So the political space is definitely something that has a cadence every 4 years for the presidential election, or in the intermediate for more local elections as well. It has a cadence. So we can anticipate that. We can do things that we'll talk about in a bit to guard ourselves from some of the stress. There are other stressors, like y'all were just talking about, where maybe you have a day's notice for a man-made or natural disaster. These are challenges that you may not be able to anticipate. So I think for this, folks are certainly saying, "Oh, it's that time again. What did I do last time?" There's a lot of reflecting back about 4 years ago. I did this. I'm looking forward to doing this time. So they're learning from what's different from 4 years ago, but also recognizing here's the pattern that I've done in the past. Here's what I want to do or to avoid. So that can be helpful to be mindful of your data over time. But certainly, folks now compared to say 8, 12, 16 years ago, what social media has done to us to feel like we're in these chambers and we're hearing messages that we want to hear that are echoed again and again. And if anyone from outside of our chamber says something else, it feels like an attack. It feels like
Mhm.
something that we can't discuss like we used to when everything was offline. So I certainly think that there are elements of what's happening now that are different from past elections, and that amplifies the stress quite a bit.
No, that makes perfect sense. And you mentioned Black men earlier. Um, with some of the rhetoric that seems like it might be directed specifically against, if not Black people, people of color, right?
Yeah.
How is this intensifying the stressful environment for Black people in particular, who might be hearing these racial subtexts on a lot of discussions?
Sometimes it's subtext, sometimes it's full text, big old text, all caps text, all up in your face. So it's, I think we
Yes.
should be really clear about that, that um, there are beliefs from some people that are hard for me to register when there is no subtlety to some of the rhetoric that is happening. Um, but again, as you indicated with your introduction to me, I study racism, racial discrimination, and we live with that every day. Folks of color live with up to 5 incidents or more per day of racism. And that's actually young people saying that that's what they
Mhm.
experience. So as you age, that tends to go up. But you're experiencing something on the daily, whether it's on your phone, in person, the slight, the racial microaggression, it shows up in a few different ways. So to have it on the nightly news, or to have someone who's holding the highest power in the nation say something and not experience consequence, not experience challenges
Censure.
because of censure,
Mhm.
right? A number, and I should be very clear that I do have a belief as a psychologist, as a woman, as someone of color, of who my candidate is, and so a lot of this is going to be underlying some of my thoughts, and it's because of what I study, the discriminatory nature of what this rhetoric can do to our bodies, our minds, and our spirits is
Mhm.
damning. It's crushing. It's soul splitting. It's not something that we have to live with. It's not something that we should be living with. But that rhetoric, whether it's subtle, whether it's completely blatant, chips away at our self-esteem, our self-identity, our happiness, our joy, our autonomy. These are things that we study and know quite well.
Mhm. Exactly. And it reminds me of the telomere study, right? The things that you're saying in terms of the way that racism can affect us at the cellular level of our being,
Absolutely.
right? And just to quickly recap that, they looked at a study of Black men and they surveyed them as to, whether they had had racism, experienced racism, and whether they internalized it or not. And those Black men who did not internalize it seemed to have better health of their DNA, something called the length of the telomeres, which are the end caps on your DNA. So healthier looking DNA than those Black men for whom they internalized it, and it, as you mentioned, chipped away at their self-image, their joy, their happiness, their sense of being carefree, right? Um, so it really affects us at the deepest levels of our being that then impacts our health.
And just quickly, Dr. Mel, the way that I talk about that is perceived or received. So some of us
Mhm,
are very aware of what's going on around us, and we can talk about it in our perceptions. We see it, we know what's happening. It's at the awareness level, and then we can do something about that to prevent it from seeping into our bodies, right? But those who receive it may not think that this is something that they have gone through, and yet our bodies tell the tale, right? There's a
mhm.
score that is kept. There's an awareness somewhere, whether it's our mind or our bodies. And so I think it's critically important in some of these conversations that I'm having with folks out in the community. It's a tight dance because you don't want to make them feel so entrenched that it's all they think about, right? Because we also know that
Mhm.
studies go the other way, that if you think so much about it and if you are so mindful of it, that you can actually experience worsened psychological outcomes. So we don't want to go all the way there, but there's benefit to being aware so that it doesn't become a part of that DNA that you're talking about.
Sure. So what are some of the signs that any of us can look for, to identify that election related stress or in general stress is immobilizing us or preoccupying us or potentially having physical effects on our body?
Yeah. I am a huge, huge proponent of data because I'm a dork, I'm a professor, and that's that's what I do, right? So I collect data and I conduct surveys, I conduct interviews with folks all day long. So having data is really important. So as we talked about earlier, this is cyclical. We know that every few years this thing happens, and so it could be useful to say, all right, a few months ago, how much TV was I watching? How much was I scrolling social media? How much did I find myself yelling or getting upset at this black box in front of me, right? Like,
Uh,
how much is this happening? Um, that's data. So if that's doubled, if that time has doubled, and now you're finding yourself in a space where you're like, I'm glued to this thing and I didn't even know. I've gone from two
mhm,
hours to 4 hours, and that's unsettling. So the first piece is just having a sense of your own cadence, your own frequency. The second is, of course, identifying the feelings and emotions behind that. So you find yourself rolling your eyes, scratching, the wall, whatever it is that you're doing
Yeah.
as a result of that. If it's causing you stress headaches, if you're feeling unable to control your emotions as a result, I know we're getting to solutions soon, but I'll do a quick little highlight of what I always say, which is you have the ability to cut off the thing that is causing you that stress. So you can cut off the TV, you can put your phone over and say, I'm going on a diet. I'm not going to allow myself to get that stress because of this thing that has a cadence, and we know when it's coming. We can actually control our behaviors around it.
Mhm. Yes. No, that's great, and it requires, like you said, self-reflection and having some insight into not just your behaviors, what you're doing, but how these things that you're receiving and exposed to are definitely affecting you. Um, and to that point, we're constantly in this environment of information overload, 24-hour news cycles. Every little piece of news is breaking, and they play that little
Yes.
music, right? Um, right.
CNN, get it together. Not everything is breaking, okay? It's
Not
just
everything is
not.
breaking, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So other than sort of turning it off and cutting back your consumption of television and maybe social media, what are some specific strategies that you recommend?
Yeah. So I mean, those are huge. And again, because of the nature of my work, if what I'm doing is helping folks' mental hygiene, the question is
Mhm.
what's being input, right? So like in the same way you talked about earlier, we can control some of the social elements of breast cancer susceptibility, right? It's what we're ingesting, it's what our body is
Mhm.
intaking. So similarly, my work is around what are we taking in to the mind and the body during this time. So again, it bears repeating that you have the ability to put that remote down, to change the channel, to turn your phone over. And again, that delicate dance of being informed, it's very important for you to know facts. And even though facts lines are being blurred right now, it is important for us to seek reputable sources to get that information. You don't have to listen to your third cousin removed who has a whole Facebook rant about this. That's not,
Wait a
like
minute.
you don't
Did you
have
check
to.
did you check my Facebook feed? Because
I
I do
did,
have
I
a third
did,
cousin. I do have a
I
third
did.
cousin, once removed, who constantly talks about views that are opposite to mine. Yeah.
I do my research. I found out what was going on in your life and I brought it to the show. But
Thank you.
like
Thank you very much.
you, me, my cousin, everybody has a number of experts on their line right now who want to tell you the tea, who want to tell you their own breaking news. And you're like, guys, that is not a verified fact. That's not a source that I'm going to spend time investigating or
Mhm.
it just bears repeating that we have the ability to control. The other piece about this, because psychology is not just about behavior, it's about action. For me, it's really about getting into the work that I want to do. If I want a certain outcome, I need to get out in the street and talk to people. I need to write
Mhm.
postcards to convince folks. I need to phone bank. I need to do a number of things that make me feel like I have some agency, right? So at the
Mhm.
end of the day, I cannot control what these Philadelphians are going to do, what these Detroiters are going to do, but I know that I'm close enough to Philly to make that train ride. I know I got folks in Detroit still that I'm going to call up and say, you better pick up as many cousins as you can on the way to these polls.
Mhm.
That's the extent and the limit of what I can do. But to feel helpless and to feel like this is all just happening to me
Yeah.
removes my agency, and that is not a part of
Mhm.
what this time is about. You want to feel
So
agentic. Yeah,
yeah, so turning anxiety into agency.
that's beautiful. What, come on, tagline. Go ahead and just put that somewhere. Go ahead. Drop that in something. Yeah, that's it.
Uh, Okay, fantastic. Um, what about for teens and young adults especially are on social media? And I was listening to someone talk about Gen Z
Mm,
and sort of the mental health challenges that they have around social media and how, when they were 12 years old, they saw the beheadings of ISIS on social
mm,
media, right? Like it was being passed around in their age group. And, when we think about what our teens and young adults are getting exposed to on social media around the politics, specifically whether it be reproductive rights or anything else, what are some of the things that we should be helping them arming them with as they get exposed to various things online around politics and the vitriol that comes with it?
Yeah, I don't think that adults have a full understanding of just how much young people are exposed to and how online they actually are. Like when we're talking about 10 hours a day as an average for young people being on these devices,
Yeah.
just imagine what a day is, right? Like you have 24 hours. In theory, you're supposed to be sleeping 8 of them, especially for
Mhm.
adolescents. You want more sleep. And then you're in school for another 8. Like their phone is glued to them, especially if they're at schools that aren't banning them yet or trying to
Right.
protect their minds, right? So
Yeah.
it,
Shout
it's
shout out to the schools that are banning him, by the way.
absolutely. And shout out to Instagram, which has started inputting these barriers, protective barriers for young people and their families. And I have to give a shout out to Dr. Robin Stevens at USC, who's doing that work. So, absolutely, there are people, places, things that are trying to put that limit. But the other end of what you said is not just how frequent, but what they're actually exposed to. And if we as adults are not engaging young people in conversation with what it is that they're experiencing, that's going to go unchecked. So there's going to be
Mhm.
a group of young people sharing stuff. They're going to give feedback to each other, and we're never going to see it because we're not on the same platforms that they are. We don't have
Right.
access to what they're seeing. They have a totally different account that we have no clue about what's.
As to what's going on.
Yeah. So we have to help to, I think, reduce the amount of time with some of the things that we were just talking about, but also regularly engage with our young people to see what they're being exposed to and invite them in on the agency side. So maybe you're not allowed to vote, right? You're under 18. What do you want to do? You want to help canvas with me? You want to help write these postcards? You have the ability to shape what your future is because this impacts you directly. So we want to make sure that your voice is heard, even if you can't vote.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And does it also help potentially to give them any historical context? So for example, as Black people, right? The things that we have made it through, that even if the election turns out to not be the outcome that we want, and I know I want a certain outcome, um, that there has been resilience and there have been our ancestors that have made it through much worse. And these are some of the tools and things that they inherit and that they can also use in terms of that historical context.
Yeah, and I'm certainly won't split hairs with you on this. The one thing I will say is that the comparative use of like this is what your ancestors went through that was worse versus you have a set of things that are challenging yourself to navigate. So it is really hard. I don't know all of these things because I'm not in your shoes. I don't know what it's like to be monitored all day long by people taking pictures and sending video of you doing the most mundane thing. That can be incredibly stressful for you as well, as our suicide rates indicate, right? Like young people are really, really struggling right now. And at the same time, we can say historically, we have also faced this, right? Not to necessarily to say it's been worse or better, but we have also gone through very challenging times before. We've made it through. We have set precedent for what you're able to do now. So let's not squander that. Let's not waste that.
Right. And I specifically meant I wasn't doing a comparative. I
Yeah,
specifically meant, you know, if the election outcome
yeah,
is one in which we take a step back in terms of civil rights and
yeah,
reproductive rights, etc., to also give the context of we've lived through this before, we will survive it. These are
absolutely.
the ways that we survived it, and to continue to be politically active and mobilized no matter what the outcome is.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, being mindful that so much of this is cadence. So I was a political science major in addition to psychology. It's a science. There is a pendulum swing. Knowing what happened after Obama was elected,
Mhm.
though so many of us were shattered and very stressed out on the couch, crying and stress eating for many days, right?
Yep.
It was predictable. And some
Mhm.
people saw the science, they saw the signs. And so it did not mean that we just succumbed to that. We had to push very hard to ensure that we stayed active. So I love that point that you're bringing up. And certainly the same here. Like, this will not be the end of our society because we can take a stand and make our agency. Or what'd you say? What was that great line? Turn our anxiety into agency. Come on. Yeah.
Anxiety to agency. Come on now.
Yes, we love it.
Well, you know what? I know that the chat has some questions in it. I got a ton more, but I want to make sure that Be Health Empowered Family has a chance to get in here and ask their questions. So Wayne and Lila, please come on back and join us. Let us know what's going on.
Hi.
Hi.
So
Wayne,
yeah,
that mic.
the intern popped back in there while y'all were
When I
talking.
find the intern, when they come back in next week, Dr. Mel, I need the power to really bother this intern.
All right.
Anyway,
Well, on that note.
on that note.
um Wayne, do you have questions from the chat? I have a question.
I have a lot of opinions in the chat.
Remarks.
I mean, remarks, opinions. Let's give Yvonne's opinion and remark.
Oh, okay.
She says, Yvonne Z. Smith says, I am disengaging from people who have views opposite to mine. If you are for the devil, I cannot be your friend. Okay.
That is one technique for sure.
It is. It is. But I feel like Yvonne makes a really good point in one of my personal stressors. And that is reconciling folks' opinions around this election and who they're voting for, reconciling that part of them with the other part of them that I may work with and know and have been friendly with. And so I feel like it is a huge stressor for me personally to reconcile those pieces, because I'm going, how are you this intelligent person and successful, and you don't seem to care about these other things that are so important to me? So that is one of my biggest challenges, doctors. This is for both of you. How do we navigate? Do we disengage completely?
Well, I'm gonna turn it to Dr. Anderson and just add a little flavor on top of it. I love Yvonne's point, but practically, not everybody has the luxury of disengaging. Thanksgiving is coming up.
Yeah.
By Thanksgiving, we will have a newly elected president, and we're still going to have to gather with family who might feel differently than we did.
Feel differently.
Right. And so we're not going to have that luxury of disengaging. We
Right.
might have coworkers that we have to go see tomorrow morning
Mhm.
who feel differently. So
Really?
what are some of the tools of constructive engagement when you have to engage with people that feel differently than you?
Yeah. And so thank you, Dr. Mel, for making me answer the hard question. I really appreciate that. I saw that. She was just like, no, and I'm going to add some flavor to it. So thank you so much for that. But really, I'm hearing two things, right? So the first that Yvonne brought up, you have a certain amount of energy, you have a certain amount of time for the day. So it is very real. Like I told you, I had a whole 20-minute, like, knockdown, drag out conversation with somebody in these streets when I could have been having additional folks sign up for voting, right? So I make choices with my time and my energy. And sometimes it's not a good use of that time or energy if someone is not moving from their point, right? So I'm totally with that idea of this person is resisting. They're not using facts, they're not using logic, and me trying any more to sway them from that is not useful. So that totally on board with. But then you're bringing up this other point, right? The folks on this podcast are bringing up a great point where sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes these are my parents. Sometimes these are the folks sitting next to me. Sometimes I have to talk with them. Know your limits, know your bounds. If that topic starts to come up respectfully, and I love that the young people use that word and I crack up every time they do. Respectfully, this is not something that brings me a lot of joy when we talk about. Can we table this for maybe a more appropriate time? You have agency. You have the ability to create that boundary and say, not today, right? To yourself, but to them, respectfully, I love you so much, or like, this is a great working relationship. I want to keep it that way. We've in the past not been able to agree on this point, and I would love if we could go back to this work conversation. So you can respectfully sidestep while not having to explain 10,000 points to them or waste your time or energy. You can kindly redirect. Now, if they don't take that cue, that is a more challenging piece. Thanksgiving can get litty because there's 20 of us and we're yelling across turkey. It gets tough. And it may be at that point, I'm going to go ahead and take my mac and cheese to the car. Like, okay, because I'm eating the mac and cheese. Like, that's going to get eaten, and you're not going to distract me. You're not going to distract me from that joy, right? Like, I want to be
upset my
happy.
digestion. Right.
So I do think, again, the point of all of this is, what's your boundary? Where do you know that you want to remain? And what's going to be that point where you have to make another choice to either remove yourself from that or ask this person if we can redirect this conversation.
So in the chat, we have Deborah James ask, what are the self-care techniques to help reduce election-related stress?
Meet you, Dr. Mel. You
Oh, no. That's for you.
That's for
that
you.
was one of them, taking your mac and cheese to the car.
You were the psychologist in the room, right?
After the mac and cheese, what do you do? What do you do? Is it Mylanta? After the mac and cheese?
I'm hoping that's not your experience. I hope that your family is
my mac and cheese is good.
Period.
That's why I'm this size. So
no
we want to ask you.
No raisins in the mac and cheese.
No
please, family.
5 different cheeses. Don't play. Let's go.
I'm expecting my invitation for the mac and cheese in the car. Let's be very clear. I want that invitation. I will say it until I'm blue in the face. Put the phone down. That's a huge one. Put the TV on black. Like, you don't have to engage in that. But the self-care techniques that just go across this and other types of stressors include mini breaks. So sometimes we don't have the luxury of that 60-minute spa massage that would bring that mind and body into a good space. Take a 5-minute walk. So disengage by standing up, recentering yourself, get a new environment, get some air, get some water on your hands. 5 minutes. So mini break is a really good way of resetting. Journaling is always helpful to get what's oftentimes a tarrying. That's my verb when something is just going back and forth. And you like that, Bruce? I saw that. Like, something is a tarrying across your brain, and you need to say, like, let me get that out. So writing can really free yourself of the insulated conversations that we're having with our own brain. Talking with trusted loved ones. So again, not the colleague that doesn't agree with you, but talking to folks that you love and trust to get an understanding of, am I off base here? Is this something that you're also experiencing? And just commiserating, that can be really helpful as well. So those are 3 quick strategies I would recommend.
And I would add to that last one. I was in a sister circle yesterday, and we were all of like mind, and that was therapeutic. To talk to people who were like-minded, I find very therapeutic as well.
Yeah. So those were, I love all of this because I need to employ them, but those are self-care tips. How do we support other folks that are around us who we know are having high levels of stress as well, maybe even higher than ours?
I think that call, the check in on your strong friends mantra is not just a
Mm,
mantra, it's real. Like there are many people right now who are struggling. And so a call or a note just to drop in and let folks know that you're thinking about them at that time. Um, I, there are lots of studies that indicate that we're going through a loneliness epidemic right now, that folks
mhm.
tangentially know each other. So they'll see what's being posted on
Yeah.
socials, but they actually don't do the work of deepening those friendships. So I would say, particularly for those who you do have a closer connection with, schedule that happy hour, go out with folks,
Mm,
take a walk. It can be things that benefit you both, but like getting that air that you both need, getting those legs moving, doing art, right? Like get creative with it, get yourself into a place where you and that person can team up and go beyond the text, the beyond the
yeah.
social DM, right? Like you're really investing some time with them and
I just
care.
had a yeah, I just had a thought, and some of my girlfriends from college started a walking challenge maybe last Wednesday, and I have to tell you, I have been far less stressed about the election stuff. I'm
Mm.
pretty involved in politics at the moment, but I have been far less stressed because I've been trying to close these rings, right? So my energy has been on closing these rings and not
Wow.
just closing them, like
Yeah.
knocking it out the park. I
Yeah.
wanna win.
Okay.
So, but I have to say that my energy has been going there, and I have been
Mhm.
so intentional about closing these rings, getting a certain number of steps in, that I haven't been giving my energy to other things, and it has been a way for us to connect and check in with each other on a regular basis. So,
I love
Yes.
there's an
Yeah.
idea.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so it's in addition to putting down the phone and turning the TV off, it's what are you gonna do with that time,
That's
right?
Yes,
exactly
Is
right.
it
right.
That's
something
exactly
that reinforces you, something that makes you helps you reach a health goal, something
Yeah,
that reconnect with people in real time, all
yeah.
those things that we know, taking a bubble bath, all those
yeah,
things that we know, help to reinforce our mental and spiritual and physical well-being that we can do when we put the phone down,
yeah.
Yeah.
right? I have
That's
another one, anxiety into action. How about that?
All right.
All right, there you go, Dr. Mel. There you go. So, there's a question about what other resources do you recommend? Any support groups, any apps for those who may feel election stress?
mm. There are some generic apps right now like Calm or
Oh,
Headspace and Talkspace, some that come with a cost, some that have free elements or
Mhm.
free trials. So I would definitely, there are certainly generic things. I'm not familiar with any specific election stress applications or groups, but I would
mm,
really underscore what Dr. Mel just said, and it was on the top of my mind. So I'm really excited that you said it, which is where does that energy go, right? So if we only have X amount of percent that can go to any one thing, if we're
Mhm.
taking it away from this thing that can be challenging, and let me kickstand real quick before finishing that sentence. It's challenging, and what does your stress add to it? Right? Like
right.
there's biblical scripture on this about what does your
Worry.
stress or worry, right, add to or contribute, right, to the outcome of this thing. So you're up
Mhm.
here biting your nails and rocking back and forth and pulling your hair out. You still got one vote. So
Right.
what are you doing with that that's going to make you feel more agency and to ultimately realize that the control is spread across so many people that your one actions or your one depletion of your own energy doesn't really add to the outcome that you're hoping for. So, what is it that you're going to do once you remove some of that stress from your mind that can make you feel like you have control over yourself, agency over yourself, and knowing that the outcome ultimately is you've done the best that you can do with that. So, that's what I would say that there are generic stress apps that may be really useful, but the question is, what do you want your energy to go to in this time that can absolve you of that anxiety?
Okay. Lie.
Yeah, so uh so much of this boils down to just the uncertainty of what's to come. So how do we fortify ourselves and be prepared for whatever it is to come?
Again, I'm going to keep it a whole buck with you. In 2016, when I was on that couch, like in the group chat, like, y'all, I think this
Mm-hmm.
outcome that we don't want, like, we
Yeah.
were eyes just swollen, like, I went to work the next day just bawling my eyes out,
Yeah.
which again, I know several people were in the same position. So the cadence, knowing that this has happened before, we've had history that has indicated what is possible with this particular candidate, with these types of elections. There's a knowing now that I think is a bit different than it was 8 years ago, when I don't believe many people anticipated that outcome. So hopefully the history can prepare us a bit better for either outcome. But maybe this is an exercise that, and as I'm saying it, I'm like, okay, girl, this is actually good, and I really may do this. Like, write down what you hope to do the next day, no matter what. So what is it
Ooh.
that
I like
on
that.
November the 6th, like, what are we about to do? Are we getting um our nails done at noon? No matter what, are we drinking tea?
Mhm.
And more importantly, like, what is it that I plan on doing, either politically, locally, civically, that's going to continue the hard work no matter who's in office, right? So what am I still committed to doing, and not kicking back and saying, oh, my person got in, or oh, I'm so defeated that this person got in. Like,
Mhm.
what are we doing to care? And then what are we doing to, let's get a good C word, what are we doing to, it's there,
Mhm.
I'll figure it out. But what are we doing to care? What are we doing
Mm.
to change? Yeah, change the world.
Mm.
How about that?
Okay.
I like that.
Me
I
too.
like that.
Wow, we're at the end, Dr. Mel.
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Anderson.
Oh, thank
We
you.
really appreciate you coming in. And, I hope my Be Health Empowered family, y'all got some great takeaways from this. On November 6th, life will go on
Mhm.
regardless. We have the tools, we have the strength. Remember your self care, make that nail appointment regardless. Um, and thank you so much, of course, Lila and Wayne. Really appreciate you. Thank you, Be Health Empowered family, for your comments and questions in the chat. And of course, until I see you again, remember, be wise, be well, and be health empowered. Thanks so much for joining.